Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Planning Commission meeting of November 3rd, 2016. Okay, Ms. Rodriguez, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Thompson. Here. Commissioner Schwartz.
Here.
Commissioner Lodge.
Here.
Commissioner Jordan.
Here.
Commissioner Higgins.
Here.
Vice Chair Peugeot.
Here.
Chair Campanella.
Here. Thank you. Okay, next we have some preliminary matters. Ms. Galarte, are there any requests for continuances, withdrawals, postponements, or addition of ex-agenda items?
We have none, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any announcements or appeals?
We have no announcements.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next we'll review and have consideration and action on draft Planning Commission minutes and resolutions. And I'm going to break that down into three stages if I can, based on the dates of the meeting. The first meeting was on October 6, 2016, and Commissioners Jordan and Lodge were absent from that. But we have the minutes of October 6th and the PC Resolution 2716 on 6100 Hollister. Are there any comments or changes on the minutes or resolution by Commission members? Okay, hearing none, can I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and two abstentions, Commissioner Lodge and Jordan. Thank you. Next is October 13th minutes and PC Resolution 2816 on 245 San Clemente Avenue. Any questions or changes or comments on the minutes and resolution? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Seconded.
Thank you. Third is October 14th, 2016 special meeting. Commissioner Peugeot.
Vote on that.
I'm sorry? Did I? Okay, on the 13th? Sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Third, on October 14th special meeting, Commissioner Peugeot, you were absent from that meeting. And we had a revision, couple of revisions this morning. I presume everybody got those and was able to look at them for the 14th. Any questions or comments on the minutes of October 14th?
Move their approval.
Second.
I have a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And
Aye. Abstain.
one abstention. Okay, do we have any comments from members of the public pertaining to items not on the agenda? Any speaker slips or members of the public wishing to talk about any other item? Okay, we don't. So now we'll go into a consent item, which is the application of the City of Santa Barbara Parks and Recreation Department for the Andre Clark Bird Refuge Vegetation Maintenance and Habitat Restoration Project. This is a consent item. I didn't know if we had any speaker slips for this particular item.
We have none, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we have none. So as a consent item, do we, any reason or questions on this item that the planning commissioners would have? Okay, we do have questions. Ms. Galarte, if they're simple questions, would we like to take them now, or do we want to have any action about the staff report first?
Mr. Chair, does your commission wish to waive the staff report, or did you want us?
Mr. Chairman, I move to waive the staff report, but take it off the consent for discussion.
Okay, do I hear a second to that motion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you.
Aye, but I do have a question on that. I just wanted to clarify, are we taking it off consent, or is it still on consent and we're allowing some questions?
You can either take it off the consent and it'll be heard at the end of the agenda. It'll be, according to your guidelines, it goes to the end of the agenda. Or you can open it up if they're simple, short questions. You can open it up for public comment, have some questions, but keep it on the consent. It's your decision.
Okay. So we're, I think we would not want to have staff stick around to do this at the end, I don't believe. So what we'd like to do is open it up to, we have waived the staff report. We'll open it up to any questions, and then we'll make a motion and action after the questions are answered. Is that
Mr. Chair?
fine? Thank you.
I think Mr. Commissioner Thompson was the one that made that motion, so is that the revised motion then, or replacement motion?
No, that's what I think we agreed. We'll take it off of consent and open it for questions, which is what
Mr. Chair,
you just said.
you've had a motion to waive the reading of the staff report. That motion was approved. Now you're opening it up for questions. So the commissioners may ask questions about the staff report or about the project.
I'm sorry, I was confused. I thought we had to put it to the end of the meeting, but we do not.
You're
Okay.
just asking questions.
Okay, thank you. We'll open it up to questions from any of the commissioners. Commissioner Schwartz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one question to staff. With receiving the Price Postel and Parma letter dated October 31st, this is on the very last page of their letter where they mentioned that though they're in support of the project, they would like a collective effort to remedy these significant water flow and flooding issues to occur by all the parties. I was just wondering if staff has any comments about whether that changes anything in our report or the timeline, the process, the particulars.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Schwartz, I'll have George Thompson respond in just a minute, but the drainage, the culvert drainage pattern that begins sort of south of Old Coast Highway, north of the tennis courts, and if you follow that culvert, it does cross various jurisdictions between the city, Caltrans right-of-way, railroad right-of-way. Then it goes back to the city property. And so within that drainage area, there's responsibilities by the railroad and Caltrans. And it is of recent that they have recently performed some vegetation maintenance, on the railroad side and in the process on the Caltrans side. George, did you have anything to add to that?
Chair and Commissioners, I'm George Thompson. I'm the Parks Capital Project Supervisor. And to answer your question specifically, it doesn't alter our application or our project scope. And as Ms. Grant said, just in the past couple months, Union Pacific and Caltrans have come to the table and done their clearing of both sediment and vegetation in their respective properties.
But do we have a particular position? Does this warrant a response? I mean, they're asking that all parties come to the table to look at a collective effort to remedy the water flow and flooding issues. Are we going to respond? Do we have a position now? I mean, are we amenable to this and agreeable and will cooperatively work with all the parties, including the representatives of the Montecito Country Club? I guess that's who Price, Postel, and Parma represents.
Yes, we are in communication with them on some separate issues, but the fact remains that all entities are at the table doing the work actively.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Peugeot? Question?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate Commissioner Schwartz bringing up the Price Postel and Parma letter with her questions, and that covers one of the questions that I had, but I do just want to express actually my appreciation to Chris Wilbrent for providing that letter, because I hope that there's continuing coordination. My second question, and I want to thank staff for bringing it to the hearing today, is the mitigation monitoring plan. I haven't had a chance to really take a good look through it, but I would like to know. I think we understood that there's just a short period of time left before that monitoring requirement, and you get periodic reports on that. So could you just give us just a very quick answer to the success of that monitoring program to date? I mean, do you find it to be successful, and what remains?
Chair and Commissioners, just for background, our 2011 CDP application and scope of work did include native plant remediation and mitigation. That work has been completed, Our original 5-year requirement to provide annual reports to various agencies that issue the permits was extended for 2 years because we did irrigation during the latter part of that 5-year period. And the reason we did the irrigation is because it's a significant public investment. It takes a lot of time and money to plant those plants, make sure that they survive, and we felt that that was warranted. So the agencies came back and said, you need to extend your monitoring for another 2 years, not because the restoration has not met the performance criteria, but simply because we did that irrigation. So to answer your question specifically, the restoration has been a success. All agencies except for the one that required the additional monitoring have accepted our final mitigation reports and signed off on our efforts there.
Okay, thank you. My last question is in regards to the document that went to City Council in September. And my understanding is that the Council granted the authority to Parks and Rec to move forward with an agreement with Anchor, I guess it is, for some technical studies for the restoration of the bird refuge. So that's going to take several months, I understand. When that is complete, I assume it will go back to City Council. Does it also come back to the Planning Commission, and does it ultimately require whatever alternative is chosen? Would then, as a separate project from this, would we be seeing that again as a coastal development permit if it moves forward?
Chair and Commissioners, I'm actually going to turn this over to Cameron Benson. He's the City Creeks Division Manager who can address that question more specifically.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Pujol. The answer to that question is yes. We expect to not only do the technical studies, but to have a conceptual design for a potential restoration project. If the council does decide to move forward with one of the alternatives, we would be coming to the Planning Commission among other state and federal agencies for permits to move forward with that project.
Okay, so Planning Commission would see it after an alternative is chosen, not before?
That's the plan right now. Yes.
Okay, yeah, perhaps we can get some information ahead of that time. That'd be great. Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Commissioner Thompson, you have a question?
I got a couple questions. Let me get you the easy one first. On page 5 of the staff report on the schedule, it says maintenance could occur as early as October. I think we're past that point. Do you have another date in mind?
Chair and Commissioners, we actually have permit authority, I believe, until the end of this month under our previous CDP. So that October date would be the following October. And as you saw on your site visit, the work has been performed, and we're now in just an annual maintenance mode. So we don't really need to get in there now to do additional clearing.
I'm not sure I understand. So you're talking about October 2017 then?
Yes.
Okay. I guess it doesn't come through in the way the staff report's written. Okay. My understanding from comments is that both the railroad and Caltrans, because they own the properties where the culvert goes under, have to make separate application.
That is correct.
And
yes.
We have no way to require them to do the maintenance other than if they just desire to do it. We have no enforcement ability.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Thompson, again, that it goes back to the party connection and collaboration with the city and Caltrans and UPRR for continued maintenance of the culvert. So it remains a continued discussion with all parties. But it is something that we want to continue to facilitate. This gets to the point that
Commissioner Schwartz raised, and that is about getting an coordinated effort to maintain that culvert. Have we ever asked the railroad and Caltrans if the city, when we maintain our portion, could just do the whole thing? Or do we have to wait until they decide they want to do it? Have we ever asked? Yes or no?
I don't think so. I would need to research that a little bit more.
No.
But there's generally in Caltrans.
I mean, it's not a big
No.
job. It's just a matter of getting out there and doing it, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. You showed us pictures of the city's portion all cleared out, and there's an abrupt line where it was the railroad's portion. Well, they subsequently have decided to do their part, but when you were doing your part, it seems like you could just continue right on, clean the whole culvert, and have done with it, and it wouldn't be a big deal. All we'd have to do is ask and get their agreement, even if it took a letter of agreement or a memorandum of understanding or any other bureaucratic paperwork. So they also have to, those as well as us, we have to apply to the city to do this work, and then we also have to go to the Coastal Commission to get their blessing on doing the work that we're talking about today. Coastal Commission is going to weigh in on this also.
Chair Campanella, Commissioner Thompson, it's for the portion that's in the original permit jurisdiction. So that is mainly the where we were at the viewing platform. That's subject to the Coastal Commission's final approval. The areas of the culvert and where the tennis courts were, the drainage there, that's under the city permit jurisdiction. And that's something that we've requested in the staff report to continue in perpetuity maintenance
For
that area.
the culvert
Yes.
and by the tennis courts.
Correct.
But
And-
not maintaining the lake, the pond. That's every 5 years still, according to this.
Unfortunately, the maximum right now with discussions with the Coastal Commission, it runs in 5-year intervals, but that's something ideally we'd like to maybe explore for all sort of city-related facilities if it could be longer time frames. But at this time, there isn't. It's the 5-year that we have to work with.
And just to get it on the record, the reason for all this maintenance effort that we're talking about is, as you explained it to us at the site, is multi-reason, vector control, flood control, improve the public experience for the bird refuge, multiple reasons that we're doing it. So what would happen if we said, no, you can't do it, we don't approve it, or the Coastal Commission says, no, you can't do it? What happens then? Flooding increases in case we ever get rain?
Chair and Commissioners, I can answer that question to the best of my ability. It's a hypothetical, but we do have those viewing platforms there. Vegetation would grow up above all of our heads, and you'd be looking at a wall of vegetation rather than open water and birds. Potential increased flooding, both at Highway 101 and Old Coast Highway, and potentially additional vectors like mosquitoes, disease vectors.
Okay, I just wanted to get that on the record. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions? Commissioner Lodge, you have a question?
Well, it seemed that there weren't any. I was going to make a motion.
Well, we have a we have a speaker slip.
Oh, you do have a
that
speaker slip.
just came in. Okay. Any other questions before I go to public comments? Okay, we'll open the public hearing. We have Cameron Goodman, who wishes to speak. Cameron, you'll have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Cameron Goodman from Price, Bostel, and Parma on behalf of the Montecito Country Club. I apologize. I came in right at the tail end of Commissioner Schwartz's discussion of our letter. It sounds like the concerns set forth in our letter were at least somewhat well received. I'm just here to reiterate those concerns and answer any questions you might have and offer any additional information that we may have from experts retained by the Montecito Country Club on this particular issue.
Okay, thank you. If you just stay there 1 second, Commissioner Pujol, you have a question?
Yes,
Mr.
thank
Goodman?
you. My question is, in addition to this letter, have you, as Price, Postel, and Parma, or your client actually taken the initiative to talk with Caltrans, the railroads, or SBCAG about this?
Montecito Country Club has been in communication with at least Caltrans. before the last rainy season and during the last rainy season, and I believe Union Pacific as well, but that communication has been a bit more limited.
Ed, do you know the result of that? Was it positive, encouraging?
I am aware that Caltrans has been, it sounds like Caltrans and potentially UPR have cleared out some of their drainage recently. The communication that occurred during the 2015-2016 rainy season, I don't believe resulted in any maintenance of their portion of the drainage system, but we're happy to forward the communication that we have between Montecito Country Club and Caltrans and I believe Union Pacific to a certain extent.
Good idea. And I have one follow-up question, because you may know the answer to this as well as staff, but Commissioner Thompson was talking about permit jurisdiction and whatnot, but the portion of the drainage and culverts that are on railroad property and on Caltrans are also a coastal zone, I believe. So do they themselves need or intend to obtain coastal permits for continuing maintenance work as the city has done?
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Peugeot, I can at least speak to the Caltrans permit. It did qualify for a coastal exclusion, and the Caltrans on their projects takes the lead on the environmental review. But as far as how it qualifies for a coastal exclusion, it's within. The culvert's within their roadway. It's called a roadway prism, and under that, it allows the authority for flood control purposes to maintain the adjacent drainage systems.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that information. Thank you.
Commissioner Schwartz.
Thank you.
Question for Mr. Goodman.
Well, I don't know if this is for Mr. Goodman and or staff, but so two questions. First, if you could just stay right there, I'm just going to pivot to staff for just a moment. So staff, I'm wondering, if not at this time, would there be a benefit to some type of a joint MOU among the four parties, Montecito Country Club, our city, Caltrans, and UPRR, to identify, an agreement on a path forward for periodic collective repair or maintenance, so that we don't have to repeat this kind of awkward, cumbersome process that I sense we're going through now with this hearing and having Price Postel come up and speak on behalf of their clients. So that's my question to staff, and then I'm going to turn towards Mr. Goodman.
We can look into that. We don't have an answer for you right now, but it's something we can look into and get back to you.
And the reason I'm asking that is in the Price Postel Parma letter, there is an assertion that, this is a decades-old drainage problem, and that they and their clients basically don't have confidence or believe that the efforts will be unsuccessful in achieving these goals unless, Caltrans, UPRR, the city, we all work collectively together, each fulfilling each entity's obligations for clearing and maintenance. So that's why I speak to the MOU. Then, Mr. Goodman, I'm looking at those who were CC'd on your letter, and I don't know if this is a question to you and or our staff, but I'm also seeing Department of Fish and Wildlife, Environmental Division, and the Central Coast Regional Water Quality Board copied. So I'm wondering if there's any need or a benefit for the Planning Commission to understand those agencies' involvements in the project and in this potentially cooperative arrangement that could be forged. Mm-hmm.
The reason that Fish and Wildlife, the Regional Water Quality Control Board, and City Creeks were CC'd on that letter is because in August of this year, the Montecito Country Club was issued a notice of violation by the Water Board for various discharges that occurred at the site during the 2015-2016 rainy season. In Montecito Country Club's response to that notice of violation and compliance with that notice of violation, this issue was brought up as a potential factor in causing the breaching and overwhelming of best management practices to contain stormwater runoff at the site. So this has been an ongoing issue that involved those agencies, and we just felt it was best to include them on our comment letter to point out that we are making best efforts to remedy this issue so that during the 2016-2017 rainy season, similar breaches do not occur at the site. To my knowledge, I don't know if they necessarily have any necessary involvement in this project, but I can't speak to that.
Okay, that's very helpful to know. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Goodman or staff? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're back to any comments. And again, we're looking for approving the project today as two applications for the amendment to the existing coastal development permit and our recommendation, Planning Commission's recommendations to the California Coastal Commission to amend the current permit and continue a 5-year routine maintenance to remove vegetation, et cetera, as we have been told, and subject to the findings that are in Section 7 of our staff report. So does anyone have any comments before we go to a motion? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I support the project, and I'll make a motion to approve the project according to the staff recommendation with the findings and conditions in the staff report. I would like to also say that you could tell from my questions that I think that this level of review and approval is somewhat unnecessary for routine maintenance. It's kind of, to me, like somebody gets a landscape plan approved by the city, and then they have to come back every 5 years and ask for approval to mow their grass and rake their leaves. This is routine maintenance for vector control, flood control, to improve the purpose of the bird refuge in the first place, public enjoyment of it. So requiring this level of review and paperwork and killing trees in order to just do routine maintenance, to me, is absurd. I think we need to be proactive, go ask the Coastal Commission, UPRR, Caltrans, if we can't get this thing routine for perpetuity as long as the bird refuge exists there. When we need to clean out the culvert and clean the weeds away from the viewing platforms, we just do it rather than having to go through this great bureaucratic flush up here. So I move to approve the project as requested.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Commissioner Higgins, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Any opposed? No. Okay, thank you. There will be a 10-day appeal on the required applications that were approved. Ten-day appeal period. Okay, now we go on to the next item. Okay, our next item is a staff hearing officer appeal on the application of Mark Morando, designer for Bruce Bivens, and Leslie Bruckner, thank you, 1127 Bath Street. We'll first have a staff presentation, and then the applicant, appellant, will have their chance to give us a presentation as well. So we'll start with the press. With the staff presentation, Mr. Perez, are you presenting?
Thank you, Chair Campanella.
Thank you.
Planning Commissioners. We are here today to hear an appeal of the staff hearing officer's approval of an interior setback modification at 1127 Bath Street. So here you see a vicinity map of the subject parcel. It's 6,000 square feet parcel, zoned R4, and is bound by Bath Street to the northeast and Curley Avenue to the southwest. The parcel is currently developed with 2 single-family dwellings and a detached garage with a storage loft above. Here's a view of the property from Bath Street. This is the larger of the 2 single-family dwellings, and work on this house is limited to alterations to the deck off the back of the house and permitting of an as-built bathroom, neither of which require a modification. And here's a view of the property from Curley Avenue. To the left there you can see the smaller of the 2 single-family dwellings, and in the middle in the background the garage, which was built in 1925 and was built on the property line, and although it was later discovered that a small portion of the garage was actually built on the adjacent property. The garage was built as a 2-car garage at the time in 1925 when it was built. However, due to its dimensions, it's about 16 feet wide by 18 feet deep, functions more as a oversized 1-car garage by today's standards. So to provide covered parking on the site, the applicant requested an interior setback modification, and the project consisted of the demolition of the existing garage and replacing the garage, or replacing with a new garage with interior dimensions of 19 feet wide by 24 feet deep. This new garage would provide 2 covered parking spaces, room for laundry facilities that would be used by both units on site, space for a water heater, water softener, as well as storage space. So here's a portion of the site plan where the work is proposed. The property lines are the red lines, and the dashed black line represents the interior setback line. The blue area represents the footprint of the proposed garage at 480 square feet, and the dark blue corner in the upper right-hand corner represents the amount of new floor area in the setback as a result of this proposal. So when staff is determining supportability for interior setback modifications, we examine whether the proposal is consistent with the intent of the zoning ordinance, whether it's an appropriate improvement for the lot, and especially with interior setback modifications, we examine if there are any potential impacts on the adjacent property. In this situation, we looked closely at the new floor area and identified that as a potential adverse effect on the adjacent property. So therefore, at the staff hearing officer meeting of August 31st, staff recommended denial of the proposal. However, staff was supportive of an alternate plan to allow the garage to be built 1 inch from the property line, minus any new floor area beyond what is required to provide the 2 covered parking spaces. The staff hearing officer was not supportive of either the applicant's proposal nor staff's alternate plan. However, despite that, the staff hearing officer approved a modification to allow the garage to be located 2 feet from the property line rather than the 1 inch requested, finding that the improvement was consistent with the purposes and intent of the zoning ordinance, and that it was necessary to secure an appropriate improvement on the lot, and that the garage was not anticipated to adversely impact the adjacent property. In addition to the approval, the staff hearing officer added 3 conditions. The first of which was that the garage door on the new garage should be a single standard one-piece door or a roll-up style door, and this was a recommendation from transportation. The second condition of approval was that the interior dimensions shall be at least 20 feet wide by 20 feet deep, and this was added as a condition because the applicant went forward with a waiver from transportation to allow the garage to be less than 20 feet as they proposed a 19-foot width. And then the final condition of approval was that the garage shall be located 2 feet from the interior property line. And within the 10-day appeal period, the applicant appealed the staff hearing officer's decision, and in their appeal letter, they stated, or they felt that the approved garage located 2 feet from the property line would reduce the open yard area, thus limiting its utility as recreational space. They also felt that maneuverability into and out of the garage at its approved location would be impractical, and that the extra depth would be necessary to provide amenities for both units on site. So with consideration to the applicant's appeal, the staff has recommended that the Planning Commission deny the appeal and uphold the staff hearing officer's decision, making the findings and subject to the conditions contained in the staff report. And as stated in the staff report, the denial finding is here on the screen. And that concludes staff's presentation.
Before we hear from the appellant, do we have any quick questions for staff on its report? And then we'll go to the appellant. Mr. Jordan.
But the 20 by 20 requirement that was back several slides, that was a maximum allowable or minimum allowable?
Minimal.
Minimum.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Chair Campanelli?
Yes.
Can I make some comments explaining my motion?
In this particular instance, or actually in modifications, when a project proposes to demolish an existing improvement or even propose a new improvement, one of the things I look for is why can't they propose a conforming option? In this instance, it is a constrained site. It's narrow. There's existing development, so it can't provide the full 6-foot setback. So I looked at some kind of compromise between the two. And in our zoning ordinance, there is a provision for narrow lots that if they can have a 3-foot setback from the interior property line if the opening's not towards the street. Well, in this instance, there's no way that they could have their opening be not towards the street. It has to be towards the street just because of the existing development. So that provision doesn't apply. So, but it could be used for a justification for providing a 3-foot encroachment, because actually when we proposed the amendment back in 2008 to allow that provision that I just explained, staff actually was proposing that any garage in the R4 zone on these narrow lots be allowed to be 3 foot from the interior property line, but the ordinance committee was concerned with that, and their concern was with the appearance of it. Although it would be required to be reviewed by design review, they just felt they didn't want the garage door facing the street. I felt I was comfortable with that, given, again, the existing development, that back unit would partially screen the door. The applicant explained their desire to provide what they feel is an adequate open yard area. They didn't want to push it away from the property line anymore. They just were proposing the 1-inch setback, even though the open yard area would meet it with a greater setback from the interior property line. So I took that into consideration too. Given transportation staff hadn't looked at a revised location for the garage, I know my experience on other projects and developments similar to this, that I felt comfortable that allowing a 2-foot setback from the property line would still be able to provide adequate maneuverability to get in and out of the garage, and it would also provide an adequate area for maintenance or other type things to happen within that area. So that's why I landed on the 2-foot encroachment, because given the constraints of the site and the different provisions of the code, I balanced all of it and came up with the 2-foot encroachment. There was one comment in the applicant's letter that I wanted to kind of respond to, is that they are under the opinion, it sounds like, that they can demo and replace the existing building as is. That's not true, in that it does cross the property line. If it didn't cross the property line, you can build it back as is legally, But one, it crosses the property line, and two, there was a addition to the roof of it, so it couldn't be built back exactly as is. So that's another comment, but I just wanted to explain a little bit further my thought process on why I landed on the 2-foot encroachment and not a 1-inch. Sorry, I say that wrong. 2-foot setback versus the 1-inch setback. Thank you.
Mr. Jordan, you have a question of Ms. Reardon?
All right. No, actually, it was still for Mr. Perez. I forgot another one. So you went by a slide there really quick, too, that talked about a single-door roll-up or lift-up garage. The plan shows a slider. I don't know if that's a slider that slides up or a slider that slides horizontal, but what's our desire for that requirement for whatever garage we're requiring versus what's on the plan?
It was just an evaluation of the project by transportation staff, and that was their recommendation based on the constraints of the site.
So your recommendation, transportation staff's recommendation, is a traditional garage door that raises from the bottom up.
That's correct.
And is this truly a slider, a horizontal slider on these plans? Is that what's been proposed?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Peugeot?
I don't have my light on.
Yes, you do. Okay. I'm sorry, Commissioner Schwartz.
Thank you. Quick question on a transportation matter. This is slide 4. And the view that we have here is of the Curley Avenue rental units. Car, I presume, that's the car associated with the tenant that's in the Curley Avenue unit. Is that correct? Because my question there is that legal? Is that a legal spot? Has that been permitted or legally allowed? It's drawn on the pavement, but I'm not clear otherwise.
Commissioner Schwartz, that's not an approved location for a parking space.
Okay. So then if we assume that car isn't there because it can't park there, when we look at the ingress-egress issues of the 2-car garage and the proposed new 2-car garage, does that change staff's consideration at all for the type of door, or staff is still holding, Ms. Reardon's nodding at, you're still holding firm on the recommendation you've made? Okay, so it has no bearing on the fact that there's right now a car that's an obstacle to improved or better ingress-egress to Curley Avenue. That shouldn't be there anyway, is what you're saying, correct? Okay. I think that's it for now. I'll have other questions later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Higgins, you have a question?
How did we find out that the garage was over the property line? Was there a survey? Or was the applicant disclosure?
It was the applicant.
Okay.
Okay, fine. If there's no other, I don't see any lights on, any other questions, the applicant appellant will now come up and give a presentation. Is that Mr. Miranda? Okay, 15 minutes, would that be sufficient for you?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Chair Campanelli, commissioners. Let's see if I think I have the same slideshow he does. So bear with me. So the front house is circa 1900 Queen Anne. It's a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, typical living room, parlor, galley kitchen. And on the back it had a service porch. So let me go. And the unit in the back, 1128 Curley, that sits at the back, it's non-conforming to the setbacks. It's like 2 feet off the interior and 6 feet back, and it's supposed to be 10 feet back. The driveway is about 15 feet 8 inches, and the garage was built in 25, I guess, after the earthquake. They've also rebuilt the chimney at that time, pulled a permit. So there's no records on file for the 2 houses. But if you look at Bass Street going north up to Anapamu, all the lots, the first 4 are like 150 by 50, and then you get to the 2 next door, which are really weird. We'll look at that in a second. And then, they all have big front houses with these little units in the back, and they butt up to Curley Avenue, which is a 15-foot. It's a private. It's actually a public alley, and so are the other 2, but they're unnamed. So they have Curley Avenue has a 10-foot setback. for a one-story. And as you come around the corner to Curly and you get on the west side, all those lots are like 150 by 50, and they have like 3 units all packed in with no parking. So you can see the constraints of Curly Avenue with, just houses everywhere all the way up to the property line and hardly any parking. That's the rear unit and the old garage with the second story that showed up in 75. And that's looking back from the rear porch, and the rear porch actually was called out on the zoning report as being illegal as well. So this is an APN map, and you can see where the lot 12 is. He has a garage that he enters off of Bass Street, and then so does the person on Curly, and then lot 14 has 2 garages at the back. They're all 9 by 20, like kind of Model A styles up against the property line. That's the rear deck, and it had a trellis. That was part of it was taken off. And you can see the service porch. That was existing, and it was remodeled. And what we plan to do is get rid of that door, put a window there. And there's a full bath that was as built when they bought it in 2011. And so we were permitting that inside. And we're going to bring the deck straight off of the rear shed roof there. This is looking from Curly Avenue back towards 1128, and this is right across the street. That's 1126, the neighbor that's affected by part of the garage. Linda Alderman's the owner, and we've talked to her, and she's okay with it being on the property line. It also spans part of the neighbor next door to the Bass side, which I haven't talked to them. But they received a mod to put the second story 4 feet from the property line up against their property a while back. And these are the plans. So what we were doing is we were matching the existing style of the Queen Anne, and we just had to chop the eave off against the property line. So there won't be any openings on the property line. It'll be hardy-sided. On the back, in order to get in to the rear of the garage on the right, if you want to move anything through there due to the private outdoor living space at the rear of the Curly unit, it's a 10 by 12 area, and there's a window towards the garage side that we're going to bring the fence off like it is now, because we don't want to put the fence through our window on the other side and just keep chopping down our rear yard. So the more we move the garage to the left, the more it affects her outdoor living space. And the reason why she parks in the driveway now is because you can't really use the existing garage. It's got a 7-foot plate with the beam coming down at like 6'6", and thing's ready to fall down anyway. So if you park in there, you're taking a risk. It's been plywooded and added a second floor on, so it needs to come down regardless. I think I have a slide of the existing floor plan there of the house. The rear bathroom and what the rear deck's going to look like when we're done. And this is just showing the property lines to the right with the garages on the other properties nearby. And this is the floor plan that I put together. You can see the dash line is the old garage line spanning over the property line, 16 by 8. Got some weird pop out where they threw the second floor up there somehow. You can see the 20-foot dimension goes all the way back to the shaded area where it says 20 feet required. 12 square feet required to create that 20-foot interior space. And then there'll be a wall behind that if we were, to meet the minimum 20-foot depth. The width is 20 feet, so minus the walls, you're at about 19.3 interior, and we had a waiver from transportation, but that doesn't really matter. I mean, we could do 20 feet, and that would mean encroaching another 9 inches to the left into the yard. And then the area in the back there to the right of the water heater, the 21 square feet, is the area that was in question by staff originally, and that's what they're saying is an exacerbation inside the setback, and it's not supported by staff. So if we were to lose that, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. The other area isn't within the setback or the open yard, so it could be approved. The only thing it would do would just alter the architectural look of the building from, matching up in the upper left. They had a double door coming out the back of that in order to get things into the backyard, because the way the fences are, they can't really maneuver anything through there. Like if they were to put a hot tub in, how would they get it back there? Probably have to either take the fences down or crane it over. So that was their idea, was just to use that to move big amenities into the backyard. As far as the garage door, the trifold unit, Bruce is an engineer, and he's been tinkering with the idea, and he really likes the idea. So he came up with this automatic 3-panel system that slides into itself each way. So if you have a 16-foot opening, you're going to have at least 9'6" open on each side. And the garage is going to be shared by the rear tenant, so she can park in the garage, and then they'll park in a garage. And Leslie's drivers, she has a little UCSB kids drive around because she's visually impaired, and that's how she gets around to her appointments and stuff. And shifting the garage 2 feet over, it actually works as a template on paper per transportation. We ran it by them after the show meeting. But in reality, trying to drive in there, shifting it over, you've got 8 feet of distance and a 16-foot door, so you're pushing it 2 feet to the property line, and then you've got a 4-foot width on this side. Trying to get a car in is going to be interesting. Sorry. I think, that the project has just kind of been an organic process of trying to, get their wishes of more space within the house. It's just a little 2-1 with the galley kitchen. And the rear unit is just a little 1. It has a galley kitchen 2 on the left side. It's pretty simple. They're going to both share the washer dryer in the garage because they don't have one now, and the rear unit doesn't have one. And I think that moving it the 2 feet, they don't really like it because it encroaches upon more of their yard. So the real problem with this is that they only have a 40-foot wide lot. They don't have your typical 50-foot lot. And if they had a 50-foot lot, then it wouldn't be that big of a deal. So moving it, like if we were to make it 20-foot interior dimension, 21 feet, move it 2 feet, that's 23 feet. They'd have 17 feet. And then that affects the whole design of the deck, another couple feet, moving the stair over, knocks down the area that extends out to like 7 feet wide. So it just really changed the whole design that we had put together and that, they kind of designed themselves and had their heart set on. So that's the reason why that we're hoping that you let us just keep it along the property line like all the other garages in the area. Do you have anything you want to add, Bruce? Or? That would be up to the commission, and we'll turn it back to you, and if you have any questions.
Thank you. I do have a couple of questions. I think in the letter that you submitted, there was a statement, and it's just a minor detail, really, that just cleared up, that you needed to move the water heater to an appropriate location or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Is that a requirement or a improved
Right
location?
now, the water heater is off the back of the service porch, and it's in the setback. It's not allowed to be there.
It's in the setback.
So we have to relocate it somewhere.
Somewhere, and this was the area you chose to relocate it. Okay. And then the other question I had is this. When, say this is approved either with the 2 feet or less, looks like those are going to be the choices, how is construction going to proceed on that property line adjacent to that closest neighbor, which I guess is the southeast side?
Well, there's two neighbors, actually.
Two
There's,
neighbors, right, two lots there.
Yeah.
I mean, how are you
Mrs.
gaining access for construction? And then just to add on to that, I think you also mentioned in the letter that most of the work that's been done on the garage in the recent past has been pretty minor, like painting. So, but even that side of the garage, how have you accomplished that if it's on and over, or even over the property line in terms of getting back there?
Well, we talked to the owner on the Curly side, and they don't have a problem with us entering the property and painting it. It's going to be hardy siding, lap siding, so it'll be sheer paneled, papered, and then cement hardy board. And it comes in a color, but we're going to paint it to match the Victorian, so
You're
maybe
going to
every 15
paint
or
and you're going to construct. So have you discussed with your neighbor how you're going to construct, which will involve encroaching onto their property to accomplish?
No, we haven't. I haven't talked to them about the actual construction process, but Mrs. Alderman doesn't have a problem, and I know the guy in the front house, but he doesn't own the house, so I'd have to talk to the owner.
And she is the owner, Mrs. Alderman's the owner?
Of the rear unit, 1128 Curly to the right.
Okay, so you've talked to one property owner.
But not the other.
Informally, but not the other. Okay. All right, thank you. And I did have one follow-up question for staff. It's really more of the transportation question, so I don't know if you can answer it or not. But the rationale for requiring the roll-up or tilt-up door versus the folding door from transportation was what?
Commissioner Peugeot, from my understanding, it was merely based on site constraints, being that the garage is right now sited right on the property line. Until they thought maybe some sort of swinging door might restrict access in some situations.
Restrict vehicle access?
Yeah, that's correct.
Just make a comment. Well, we met with Stacy Wilson and went over the garage door slider. And she said, go ahead and create engineered drawings and bring it in, and they'll run it by the people in transportation, and they'll make a decision for us. So
it's a pending decision by transportation, not a final decision? Is that what you're saying?
Correct. She said bring it in, and they'll look at it, and they'll give us a determination. But if it's part of a condition, then obviously there's nothing we can do.
To date, you haven't brought in your current design, which is the folding door design, to them?
We showed it to her, but we didn't turn it in to the whole staff.
For a formal review?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see, who's next? Commissioner Lodge?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You said that the existing garage is 19 feet high. Tell me what the height of the existing garage is and the height of the proposed garage.
Well, the existing garage has a illegal second floor added to it, so it's around 15 and a half feet, and so will the new one. But it's going to be pitch because it's a 7.5 and 12 pitch. So it started at a 9-foot plate and going up to the 15.6. It's on hard to see on the upper right there.
Right, I realize that. Okay, so it'll be essentially the same, except that the mass and volume will be a lot less.
Right, the other one has this square, and this is going to just be a triangular to match the Victorian.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jordan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So why is the pitch so steep? Is it matching something?
Yeah, the front Victorian facing.
And then the plate height too? Plate height seems kind of high for a garage to begin with. 9-foot plate height with a
typically it's an 8 feet.
7'6" garage door.
Right.
Right. So I don't know. I just know what I have.
It was just an architectural design feature to be able to get his truck into.
Okay. So would I be? I don't want to tell you what I drive, but would I be correct in my perception that both of those are? I'll give you the plate, the pitch size to match the front, even though you don't really see the front from back there. But the plate height, isn't that tall for a garage? And the height of the garage door?
It depends on what you're driving
7'6"?
in. I mean, standard would be an 8-foot plate, 8'1" plate.
Okay.
And then with the beam, you're probably at like 7, 6.
I'd like to leave the kayaks on top of my truck too when I go in, but yeah, all right. And then for staff, what are the parking requirements in this zone as they apply to this parcel?
Commissioner Jordan, parking requirements in residential zones are based on the use, not the zone. So this lot is developed with 2 single-family dwellings. Therefore, the requirement is 2 covered and 2 uncovered parking spaces.
And so is it legal non-conforming, or why isn't it having, with this work, why isn't it having to come into conformance?
It is legal non-conforming, and for it to be required to be brought up to conformance, they'd have to have an addition.
The house, not the garage?
Yeah, of
Okay.
more than 50%.
All right.
Floor area.
Okay. And then I guess I have the same kind of question on your desire to put this right on the property line. And you've talked to one or both of the current owners there already, but you have another owner who doesn't want to give you access over there. How do you maintain that wall?
I don't think the wall doesn't have to really be maintained other than the paint, because it's a concrete siding.
Okay. And then the elevations you show just kind of show on that side too. Looks like a normal roof, normal wall till it gets there, and then it abruptly just cuts off at a plane. Are you gathering the water on that side also, or not?
No, we didn't put a gutter on the side.
Okay. And so staff, is that appropriate to drain your roof runoff directly onto another property?
Commissioner Jordan, no, it's not. Typically, we'd ask that any stormwater be retained on the subject parcel.
If you had a gutter attached to that's another, 4 or 6 inches, would that be another 4 or 6 inches overhang or whatever the phrase is over the property line?
That's correct.
I mean, it's not a nothing that doesn't get shown. It's actually a further intrusion into over the property line, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Higgins?
Thanks. So you're willing to reduce the width of the garage to 19.4? Is that right?
That's what we're proposing. Interior-wise, it'll be 19.4,
I understand
20
the interior, but it's not on the plans. Is it 20 exterior? Is that what's on the plans?
Right, 20 exterior makes
Okay.
it, yeah, with the wall minus the walls. It'd be like 5-inch walls, so 19.2.
And so the project before us is the 20-inch outside diameter, 20-foot outside diameter garage.
Correct, 20 by 24.
Thanks.
Commissioner Schwartz?
Thank you. In no particular order, I have just a few questions here. From the appellant's letter, I want to ask you a couple of questions. Remind me, please, where do you currently have located everything that's identified on your first page? Water heater, water softener, full-size washer dryer? Or where do your clients have property
Currently,
owners?
the water heater is on the back of that. They're on the right of the deck. Off the
okay, that's what
service
that
porch.
unit is? Okay.
That's the water heater enclosed with the pipe coming out.
Okay.
There is a stack washer dryer that's illegal that's being taken out in the service porch back there, across from the fridge. It's the pantry.
Can I ask you to use a pointer here? Ms. Rodriguez, or you have one for him? Thank you. Okay, so the water heater's on the deck, and again, as you're moving towards that, the deck is not permitted, correct, staff? Isn't that what I heard? Or it was called out in the ZIR when the property turned over?
Correct. They called out the existing deck as illegal. They called out that this service porch in here was changed to a full bath. There's a fridge here, and there's like a stacker there. But that's, I don't think I have the demo plan on these plans.
So is it basically that the water heater, water softener, and washer dryer cannot remain where they are today because they're not permitted? They're in illegal locations. Is that correct?
Correct. And this window was changed out, but the city historian's okay with it. This French door was added. We don't know what was there, but they're saying that we changed it. So we're permitting that. It's a wood French door. The water heater sits over here. It's to be removed because we can't have it in the setback. This is 4 feet 2 from the setback, and the neighbor is 4 feet this way. So there's about 8 feet 2 inches between them. The deck now comes to here and it spans all the way across. So we're getting rid of the door that comes out onto the deck. We're shifting the deck back to here, and we're taking it all the way just to the trim piece, just to the right of the trim piece. So this is beyond the setback. This is at 6 foot, and this side's at 4 foot, just the way they built it. So the water heater came off of here, and that was pretty much it. They called out that this was remodeled, and the deck, basically the whole back of the house. And when we took the garage to the architectural board on May 9th, the guy loved the project. He was psyched that we were matching the existing Queen Anne, and he just asked that we shift the gable on Curly back a little bit to tighten up the Dutch gable end, so we could get a window in there to match the Victorian on the front. And that was his criteria, so we changed the drawings to show that.
So if you could hold on for a moment, I want to ask staff.
Can I just ask a clarification on what was just said? When you had asked Mark, and Mark could probably answer this, you asked Mark, can the existing washer, dryer, that stuff in the porch area, could that remain? Mark, what part of the porch enclosure, was that called out as a zoning violation in the ZIR?
It wasn't enclosed. It was changed, I guess, on the inside.
Okay, so wouldn't it be able to get a building permit? It just needs a building. It was added there illegally, so to allow it to remain in that enclosed space, it would need a building permit. Or why are you saying no, it couldn't be permitted where it's located right now?
You mean on the washer dryer?
On the larger house, correct.
So this little service porch here, we don't know what it was before, but now it's a shower with a toilet and a sink, and the fridge is actually here, and there's a stacker there that we're taking out with this project.
Okay, but you could ask for a building permit and have it remain there.
We could put it, we could put it in the kitchen, but the idea is eventually if they have any money left after this, to open up this wall and connect the two spaces, because the galley doesn't really function, and then make this the pantry and the fridge here, and then open up this room and get the stove out of the room by itself. And
that was just my question.
Yeah,
just
there
for
is a way
clarification that I thought it could
we
get
could
permitted.
design it, but then we'd have to also create one for the rear unit on Curly 1128. I don't have a floor plan for that. I've never been in it, but I think it just has like a little typical kitchen over here with a living room and a bedroom, bathroom back here. That's the same as this exact house. And there's a whole bunch of them right here, like 4 of them all the same.
So part of staff, part of where I'm going with this, maybe you can also help me, Ms. Reardon, is would the property owners be able to, with what you are recommending proposed for the square footage of the newly built 2-car garage, with the setback you would feel most comfortable with, can they actually legally relocate? And I'm looking at your letter, sir. The water heater, water softener, and full-size washer dryer. I mean, I'm trying to sort of perform triage on everything your clients want to do, why you're having, why it's a rub for you, why it's difficult for you to accept the show's findings, and what you want moved where and for what purpose, and is that really necessary? That sort of therein lies the crux of my inquiry on this subject. So, Ms. Reardon, can you comment at all about?
Well, my trade-off on my action was staff was originally proposing or recommending approval of the modification, but removal of that extra area that's not that's greater than 20 by 20. Remove that area.
Yeah, can we highlight that area you're talking about, Ms. Reardon?
Yeah, he's showing you the correct one. And
this is required.
Being it's right on the property line, it's not necessary to improve the garage's function. I did a trade-off that I said, approved a 2-foot setback, but said you can keep that extra area since it is set back from the property line, the 2 feet. So that was my trade-off. They could relocate it wherever they want with the building permit. Outside of the setback, there's not a garage size or a dimension maximum outside of the setback, but since they're asking for special relief, we usually just grant what the minimum is necessary. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so. With this highly constrained site, I'm trying to understand if we could, this is sheet A2, and I don't know if you have a correlating slide, but, you know, when we look at kind of bird's eye view here and from Curley Avenue all the way through to Bath, when we look at the side portion, the side line of the Curley Avenue unit, today it looks like it's already impeding maybe a third, I don't have the exact square footage, a third of the garage, which forces a car to come in at an angle.
Right, that's right.
Which
here.
is not uncommon Santa Barbara. We see a lot of these situations, you know, in these older kind of non-conforming property configurations. So I'm trying to understand how if your requests are granted, how you're going to actually accomplish everything you've set forth in your letter and make it feasible for 2 cars to come in and out of here and accommodate a full-size washer dryer, you know, et cetera.
Chair, Commissioner Schwartz.
Yes.
There's 15 feet 8 inches across here of driveway opening. This fence is on the neighbor's property per the survey. There's about 8 feet to the garage.
Okay.
There's the 16-foot opening right there, so there's 4 feet this side of it. If you can just drive straight in one car, and you can pretty much drive straight in and turn a little bit into here for the second car. The area here, the washer dryer and the water heater, is beyond the 6-foot setback. So this is not in the open yard. It's not in the setbacks. It could be permitted to be there. It's not, we could put further additions on it if we wanted to, but they don't want to. If we shift it over, it just keeps encroaching more into this space here. We have to shift this over. It makes the deck 7 feet wide. And it just keeps encroaching into the line of sight and their outdoor usable area here. That's the main reason. I don't think that maintenance is such a big deal. Maybe in 50 or 100 years it might be, and they'll have to replace the siding, and who knows who's going to own the home. So, but that's the way everywhere. I mean, all the little garages are set all the way in the back of the lots, and they have to be expanded from 9 by 12 or 9 by 18 to, 10.5 by 21, and that's. Typically, they were all along town. That's the way, and you're allowed to maintain that. And what Susie was saying about it going over the property line, if we weren't allowed to rebuild this, then we're going to have to get a mod anyway of some kind. It won't matter, whether they're going to move forward with this project, depending on what happens. That's
okay. Okay, I think those are my questions for now. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Commissioner Jordan, back to you.
A couple more questions for staff. You let me look at plans too long, I get dangerous. So either one of you, so I think you already determined if you move the garage footprint 2 feet to what we're calling north, that it doesn't affect the open yard. He still has adequate open yard, and in their letter they just said they'd like to keep more open yard, right? So what happens if you move the garage towards, forget the deck right now and the stairs, but if you move the garage towards the house a couple feet, do we end up with open space or separation issues there?
Commissioner Jordan, the open space would not be affected. They would still meet the minimum requirements for the R4 zone, and the minimum distance between buildings is 5 feet.
And they're at 8? Am I squinting at that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And so one of the concerns I'm hearing, Mr. Mrundo, is this 2 feet shift over and then the difficulty of doing the serpentine into the garage. And if you did scoot the garage back, whatever distance, any distance towards the house is distance gained, that would lessen that issue of the serpentines, right? Forgetting about the deck so far, right?
Yeah, somewhat. We'd have 3
Okay.
feet if we moved it
And
back.
then, and so I guess it would be a discussion on the design issue, what you're going to give up there, where you're going to run the stairs, if you're going to run the stairs towards the back, if you're going to run the stairs towards the side. I don't know how all that played in, but I guess I'm just going to ponder that, and I'll work on that in my comments then. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair Campanella and Commissioner Jordan, another option would be is to remove the area that Commissioner Schwartz was talking about with the full washer and dryer. That wouldn't meet the objectives of the applicant, but since there is an existing washer and dryer in the front unit, that would be another option to get the 20 by 20, and it wouldn't have to get any closer to the house.
You mean actually, so make the proposed garage footprint smaller?
Correct.
I'm trying to keep it just as
Yeah,
big.
just to let you know, that would
So
be another option. If
doing a
you're
little bit of work on their side.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
thank you.
Let me just jump in on this question if I can. Are there separate washer dryer facilities for both houses, or do they use the both? They both use the same washer dryer.
Stackers. I haven't been in the rear unit, but he said there's a stacker there.
There's a stacker in there?
Right.
Okay. So I just want to make sure, based on your suggestion, you weren't eliminating access for one of the units. So, okay. Sorry, Commissioner Peugeot?
I'm ready to try out a motion if we're at that point yet.
I have a couple of questions, if I can. Thanks. Let's see. On the requirement for a garage is 20 by 20, correct, in this zone? This use is 20 by 20 dimension?
Well, that's the standard dimensions of a two-car garage.
Okay. If looking at the standard image, what we have is about a, if I can judge this, about a 16-foot door and a 4-foot restricted area to the left of the door. Is that correct? That makes up your 20 feet?
Correct, like 3 feet 6, yeah.
I'll call it restricted. I may be using the wrong terminology, but there's no restricted area except for some type of support, I would guess, for the sliding door on the right side, if I'm looking at this, towards the other property owner that's on the property
Correct,
line.
there'll be a 4 by 6 beam there.
Okay, so it's hanging completely, so you don't need a structural vertical support for the garage door on that side, on the right side of the garage, just a header.
Yeah, just a header in either case.
Okay. Now, is there any requirement on the 20 by 20 that each side have 2 feet clearance at all for exiting or passengers or anything like that? So this configuration complies and is not in violation of anything, given compliance with the 20 by 20, as we understand it.
In that case, no, there are no concerns with that.
Okay. Currently, the current garage is, because of its size, is parking 1 car. Is that correct? In the garage, or are you fitting 2 in the current garage?
I don't
Or
think
not?
they park any in the garage right now.
Okay, if they wanted to, what would,
Occasionally, they park a car in there.
what's that?
Occasionally, they park a car in there.
Okay, would it fit, as designed currently, would it fit 1 car, or would it be able to fit 2 cars?
1 small car, because the header's really low.
Okay, so that's the obligation for, in this particular use, for 2 cars covered, enclosed, 2 cars open outside of the setback. Right now covered, 1 possibly and maybe not at all, relative to the current situation that exists.
Right, it's about 15 feet, 2 inches clear in there right now.
Okay. I'm just looking at the improvement that's being made to comply with, parking requirements, which is an improvement, as we're evaluating, I'm sure, which staff saw as well. The other part, I guess, whether you have 2 feet or 0 feet to the property line, when it comes time for construction, you're going to have to get some permission from your neighbor for access.
Correct.
to get material back there, which may involve, I don't have a picture of the neighbor's unit, but may involve taking down, well, it's going to involve taking down the fence, which now abuts the garage, correct? That fence goes along the garage as well. It doesn't terminate at the current garage face. It continues on along the property line.
Now it terminates at the garage on each end.
Okay.
So we would just be taking down a part of it at the rear of it.
To get material in, et cetera, for building.
Yeah,
So
we'd
one
have
way
to
or the other, whether it's 2 feet, 6 feet, or no feet, you're going to have to get permission from your neighbor for construction to lay out and get construction material in there.
Correct.
Okay. All right, I think that's my questions. Any other questions before we go to comments? Okay. Comments? Ms. Peugeot? Commissioner Peugeot?
Thank you. I think my comments will also be in the form of a motion. So my leader comment is, this is a neighborhood, a street, a public alley of great charm and character. It's just lovely. And I think that in our presentation and in the applicant presentation, you pointed out some of the quirks of the area that create that charm and character. So I am in support of using my discretion as a commissioner to fall on the side of allowing the project to move forward with the 1-inch setback, because I don't think it is at all out of character with the remainder of the street. I understand, Ms. Reardon, the nuances of the ordinance that get to some of the requirements that you placed on it, but I think in this case it will function quite well, pretty much as designed. So I do have a couple of things I would like to bring up in terms of the conditions. I think that the conditions of approval and is already set up to approve the interior modification, and then it adds conditions. So I think everything we're talking about really today falls on page 2. All the questions that were brought up and the appeal issues that were brought up are really on the conditions on page 2 of the staff hearing officer resolution. So if we turn to that page, I would move to first to change the conditions as follows. First, under condition 2A, I would change that to say that the rear garage door shall be subject to approval of the Public Works Department, and let them give their final okay or modifications to whether it's a folding door or a roll-up door. On item B, I would keep that as is, because I do think it's a good idea with some small modification to make the interior 20 by 20, because then it is a standard garage, which I think if you're going to rebuild the garage, that it would be a good idea to be standard in its minimum dimensions for 2 cars. On item C, that's the one that we've spent most of the time talking about, is the 2-foot setback. So I would eliminate item C as worded, but I would like to do 2 other things. One is, as Commissioner Jordan mentioned, have a replacement condition C that basically requires that any of the runoff, including the roof runoff, be maintained on site. And if that means you have to do a little bit more shifting because of a gutter or other system for doing that, well, then so be it. But I would include that as a new C. And then I would add another condition, and I don't care whether it goes before or after the standard condition D that's already on there, but I would add another new condition that basically says that the applicant shall submit proof of access for construction purposes prior to start of construction. So that would be my motion. Let's see if we get a second.
Can I, before we take, I just want to clarify something on C. C currently states there's a minimum of a 2-foot setback, so it doesn't have.
I would eliminate that language and create a new C that involves retaining the roof runoff on site.
So your motion is not addressing the setback at all?
The proposal already includes a project description for a 1-inch setback, and I would support allowing that.
Okay, so C doesn't, it's already in there. C would be modifying what's already in the project description as far as the 2 feet, so we don't need that.
C would be, the existing C would be eliminated, a new C would be added regarding the roof runoff, and then an additional condition would be added regarding construction access.
Okay, good. So
Second.
the 1-inch setback as provided in the project description is what is going to be.
Correct.
Okay, thanks. Just want to make sure because it wasn't in this section. Okay, we have a first and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Okay.
Can I ask a question, clarify?
Okay.
Regarding staff's original, when they were supportive of the modification to allow the 1-inch encroachment, they were suggesting that the portion of the building be carved out. So that only the 20 by 20 garage is within the setback, but the area that's not associated with the garage, that's new floor area, that be removed. So a little notch in the area. So I wasn't sure if you were if that condition was included in your motion or not.
This area up in here.
Well, your proposal is to include that area, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. That's what because I see the value and the usefulness of having the washer and dryer in there and moving the water heater or whatever in there, and I don't think it's at all egregious.
Okay. The only discussion I would have, I think it's been cleared up that at this point what we're approving is something that the applicant agrees with at this point.
Chair Campanella, I've talked to the owners and they agree.
Okay. Okay. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair.
There's a light on, Mr. Chair.
Sorry.
Before you call a vote.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Jordan. Sorry.
Thank you. So I have an alternative viewpoint, I guess. So just want to make sure I get it in. I agree with everything that's part of the motion except where the garage footprint is. I think this is the proper time to get it away from the setback. This is the time to do it. Frankly, I understand now he's an engineer, but Mr. Bivens' letter was pretty much a layout of everything we needed in this project or wanted in this project without recognizing the constraints of the zoning ordinance. And I think there's certainly room on this site, both moving the garage away from the setback and moving the garage towards the house while keeping the rest of the components you want, the larger size, the amenities, the gained square footage in what would still be setback area, and still recognize the responsibility you have to your neighbors to get that structure off the lot. I think I'm going to be on the short end of that, but that's how I feel. I appreciate, too, that it's not going to be a vertical wall, 2-story addition, that what's out there now looks obscene, and what you're going to be putting out there, no matter where you're putting it, is going to look a lot better. And I also, if this is the way the motion stays, I won't vote for it, but I also think my 2 cents on your garage door is you should put any kind of garage door in there that doesn't rotate into the ingress area, that stays in the garage footprint. If that's a slider, if that's a roll-up, whatever you want to do. I don't really understand staff's position on a slider would get in the way of coming in and out of the garage, but a roll-up wouldn't, because they both are on the same plane. So as the motion stands, I won't. I think the staff hearing officer points were very material to the site. I think there is an improvement that you can make to the site, but you don't need the concession, that as much of a concession as you're asking for. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Higgins?
So the expansion of the non-conforming structure and the notch out, I think, is what I'm having a little trouble with, because I'd like to hear from staff about how we can approve this in this situation and not have the same situation come back and keep coming back. And I guess where I'm going with that is there a way to construct the findings or add into the motion that because the applicant is picking up a covered parking space, that's what, or otherwise attempting to alleviate a non-conforming parking situation as much as possible, even though we're not bringing it up to conformity, that be the basis for why we're allowing the carve-out to remain? Do you understand my question?
Hi, Danny Cato, Zoning Supervisor. Commissioner Higgins, yeah, I understand the question, but the idea of the notch isn't necessary for the minimum parking dimensions, right? I would think that the justification for the notch is that it's architecturally it's architecturally uniform. It's a better looking building, and more in keeping with the historical nature of these types of buildings as a full rectangle as opposed to a rectangle with a notch cut out of it.
Okay, that's fine. It works for me.
Commissioner Lodge?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I personally think that the rear garage door is more attractive as a slider. It fits better with the architectural style, and I really don't understand why the requirement for the single-piece roll-up door was put in there.
Commissioner Campbell, or Chair Campbell, can I answer?
Sure.
So generally, we don't like the sliding doors because, at least in our experience, it's okay. Garages are not used for parking very much in this city. And what we found is garage doors that are sliders like this, or the ones that open up kind of like gates, French doors, those kind of things, they're used for parking even less than the traditional like flip-up door or roll-up door. But that's mostly the reason that we don't like them.
Okay, thank you. Now, as I understand it, there is going to be a need for a gutter on that side, the side next to the property line, which would be extending whatever the width of the gutter is over the property line. I'd like to propose, well, as we're splitting the baby and requiring a 1-foot setback, and I don't have a problem with the corner at the back of the garage. I mean, to me, it sounds as if it would look really odd to have that little notch cut out, and it doesn't really do anything for sort of the site planning. So I wouldn't agree with I wouldn't vote for the motion. I would vote to grant the appeal with different conditions, but not as proposed. Thank you.
Okay. Well, let me, if I can, are you making a new or you have further discussion? We have a second. I just want to get my discussion point in on the motion. I'm sorry. Good.
Aye.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to speak to the access condition. I would like to recommend to the maker of the motion that condition be stated in the alternative, either that they demonstrate that they have access to use the adjacent parcel, or that they demonstrate to the building officials' satisfaction that they have a construction methodology that does not require that access. I don't want to give a neighbor veto if one isn't necessary.
Okay. We don't, normally we take public comment here. I don't see anyone else in the audience. I don't have any speaker slips. So thank you, Julie, for reminding me. Okay, on the motion that's seconded, a question for staff. Mr. Jordan, in his comments, would like to see, his discussion would like to see the garage move back to provide extra space at the rear and also the clearance in the front, and this removing some of the serpentine or making it easier. Is there, I don't know if you had a dimension that you were that you would on a new motion, but is there any constraints in moving it back that we aren't aware of relative to the separation from the main building or porch as proposed?
In terms of the zoning ordinance, just the separation between the minimum distance between buildings would be the only constraint.
Say it again.
The zoning ordinance constraint would be it would need to be 5 feet from the adjacent buildings. There must be a minimum distance of 5 feet. But other than that, zoning-wise, there's not a constraint.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion on the motion? Commissioner Pujol?
Right. As the motion maker, I just wanted to go over some of the comments. First of all, on Commissioner Higgins' comments about the findings, if we modify the permit per the motion, I had mentioned pattern, context, and character, but I think the appropriateness of the design could be added in with that too. And then secondly, in terms of Commissioner Jordan's comments, as the motion maker, I prefer not to amend my motion to move it back, and this is the reason, though. Usable outdoor space for each of the units is also important, and I leave that in my mind to the owner and the designer to determine what is the best usable space for the outdoor area for each user, and I don't really want to at this point to go into that level of design to determine that. So I'd rather leave my motion as is on that regard. And then finally on the 1 foot versus the 1 inch setback, I appreciate trying to look at additional compromise situations. However, on that one, I also prefer to leave my motion as is and not move it to 1 foot. And that is because I actually understand the 2 foot setback more than I would understand a 1 foot setback, because a 2 foot setback would allow a person to walk on that side or to plant some hedges or something in that area. But a 1 foot, I don't think really gives you any of that opportunity. So for those reasons, I leave my motion as it stands.
Okay, I'm sorry, you mentioned Mr. Higgins. Were you in favor of Mr. Higgins, Commissioner Higgins' comments?
Well, I think there was a little bit of follow-up discussion and questions to Mr. Cotto about that. So what I got from that, in addition, in terms of the findings for a motion to what I had already said about pattern and character, I would like to add and amend that part to also state that it also is an appropriate design for the property and for the structure. And I believe that an Architectural Review Board had positive comments on that as well. So I would go more to that.
Okay. So the structure part, complementary and structure part, I understand. Is this the second of the motion okay with that modification? Okay. So we have yes.
Sorry, can I ask for clarification on the motion? Commissioner Pujol, I heard you say on the drainage issue that drainage has to be on the property, on the subject property, and if that requires the building to be set back a little bit to accommodate a gutter or whatever, that would also be part of your motion, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Is that clear to the second? Okay. All right, we have a first.
Clarification, if I may.
Clarification.
So that means that it would end up being whatever the depth of a gutter would be, it would be set back that distance from the property line?
I don't know all alternatives available to collect the roof runoff for the structure. But if that's what it took, then yes. Does that make sense?
Commissioner Pujo, that's what it would take. I'd have to move 3 or 4 inches to get a gutter
Okay,
on
well
there.
then, so be it. That's what you would need to
Because
do.
we couldn't really hide it in the eave, or it wouldn't look right.
But rather than determine how many inches or what exactly that is now, I would rather have a condition that accommodates the need to do that. And then if that's the case, then the applicant would need to modify his design to accommodate.
Okay. Let's see. So, again, the second is there, and I have Mr. Higgins. So I'm just checking with the second that he's okay. Okay. Mr. Higgins?
You're going to amend your motion with regard to the access comment that Scott made about?
Thank you. Yes, and I will revise my proposed language on the construction access to that Mr. Vincent had given us.
Commissioner Schwartz.
Thank you. I just wanted an opportunity to quickly comment on 2 reasons why I am going to support the motion. And that is the pattern in this neighborhood, these very old homes, very constrained lots, I think warrants special flexible consideration in terms of setback. That's number one. Also, this is an opportunity to not only remedy an illegal structure on the property, but create an improved, hopefully true 2-car garage. We can't require that the cars necessarily be in the 2-car garage. We're certainly always hopeful that that's the behavior that occurs. But, with this heightened scrutiny on our average unit size density incentive program and the reduction of parking, remedying a difficult and antiquated parking situation like this that gives the property owner full flexibility and provision to park 2 cars out of the public right-of-way, off the street, in a garage, I think goes towards assuaging some of that concern that we're hearing in our community, especially in these neighborhoods that are highly constrained for parking on site. So I think this addresses that and advances that opportunity. And we're just hoping that the 2 cars do get parked in the garage. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay. I agree as well with the points in the motion. I think the only thing I do feel comfortable with is the garage door, and I understand Mr. Cato's concern, but I think a slider is not coming out into the front of the garage. It's as far as constraints. It's I could see doors pulling out would constrain movement, et cetera, but I think a slider would be less of a problem and might be a good design, depending on blending with the architecture. But I know that's just a comment. I know what we're proposing. Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. Commissioner Lodge?
Since it's been clarified that the issue of the intrusion of the gutter into the over the property line has been taken care of in the motion, I will support it.
Okay. Okay. So we have a motion as revised, second as approved. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay. Mr. Jordan said no. Okay. So we have upheld the appeal as modified, and our decision can be appealed itself for 10 days. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. That's our last item for discussion. Our administrative agenda, committee and liaison reports. Hearing officer, liaison report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nothing exciting to report from last week, but Mr. Reardon and I will have our hands full next week already, I know, looking at the staff reports. So nothing to report. I'll just move on to Water Commission, if that's okay.
Sure.
I have pages to report there, so you might just sit back and relax.
That is topical.
If you happened to watch last month, there's been a little internal discussion going on among commissioners about information coming or not coming to the Water Commission. and enough to the point that a couple commissioners got together and walked up the food chain to have a meeting about that. And what's come back down out of that meeting is there are some serious concerns with the city about issues being discussed related to litigation. So they've actually gone so far as to list out a list of items that potentially and probably will not appear at Water Commission before they appear in one manner or another at council, whether in closed session or for the first time at council. I think it's a bunch of those lawyers doing no free discovery work for the opposition. But they include things like issues concerning desal expansion, sharing of desal with Montecito Water District, what's going on up at Kachuma with the state water rights order and the biological opinion, and drought-related water quality violations and the wastewater consent decree that's still going on apparently with Channel Keeper. So most likely you will hear or see about those things first on a Tuesday meeting rather than a Thursday Water Commission meeting, and that's just the way it's going to be. The drought update was absolutely no good news. We continue to be in the epicenter of Southern California's drought area. By the time we get to next summer, we'll be looking at a net an annualized net 300 acre feet shortage of supply if we use water at our continued conservation rate. So you'll hear different numbers as we go along in the year that might be anywhere from 30 to 40% conservation. That number actually goes up or down significantly based on what time of year it is. It's much easier to save water right now, 2 weeks after that nice set of rain, and a lot harder to save water in the middle of July when it's 95 degrees out for 3 weeks. So NOAA is still saying they have no clue on what the future holds, and the plans are to just anticipate that it's going to be about the same. The city has, I think, finally, after 3 city council meetings, started to broach the subject of how to prioritize our remaining uses for water within the scope of what we're already conserving and relative to the no gain in water and the projected shortage next summer. And that's taking the place in discussions Tuesday, and finally getting to a point where we will have some type of sanction against just watering turf grass areas, or looking for ways to even push that conservation average up to, say, 50%. And that's the number I've kind of heard in the background is we need to get to next summer and be conserving at a 50% rate, and the tools we have to do that are to conserve at that rate, or to quit watering, to start to prioritize and quit watering some things and not others. And I think the focus right now is on turf grass and trying to protect our shrubs and trees, certainly trees. By the time we get to December, what's called the carryover water in Kachuma will be gone, and so that means the water that we've had saved, storaged, or inventoried will be all gone in Kachuma. I think all the other 4 or 5 agencies will be in the same situation. So Kachuma will basically become a big conveyance tool, bringing water in from somewhere else in the state. It will not be storing. It becomes literally a dance with multiple partners, because if you picture a pipe coming in there, it's split up between 5 water agencies like a pie, and all of those water agencies for the next 2 or 3 years are projected to be using all of their capacity 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So even if we had access to more water somewhere else, there's not a method currently to get it here. So that's kind of disconcerting. And then if there was, with the low level of the lake and storing it, there's a huge evaporation loss when we store it. So you have to, depending upon the time of year, you have to exponentially multiply what you need times what will evaporate and really go after that much, which then increases your your reliance on carving out some of that capacity in the pipeline that already doesn't exist. So not a good picture all the way around. The groundwater wells are all working at full production right now, and Downtown Basin and Foothill Basin are both about down to 30% capacity by projections in the city as to what's still under there. And we are looking at very shortly starting to reduce our pull on those basins, which is a planned event. We still are not seeing any serious intrusion of salt water, but it's getting close enough that they've increased the frequency of monitoring and increased the monitoring sites. So I take that as at any time, one of two things is going to happen. We're going to get to a point where we don't want to draw anymore, or we can't draw anymore because we're going to see the signs of saltwater intrusion. The desal plant is currently the big focus right now. Is they got a bunch of divers out in the water out there working 2 shifts, 2 8-hour shifts, putting pumps and equipment down into the water. What was supposed to be a January start for desal is probably now put back till February, maybe March, and that's a combination both of that equipment that they had to replace that was underwater there that blew up when they tested it, and the fact that it's highly uncertain if you just get a period of time out there underwater to work without weather conditions or with good visibility. So I think the reality there is if you told yourself it's going to open and be working by summer, we'd be really happy. So I think it's, if you just had that as your expectation. Let's see. The continued conservation, the plan to limit the potential plan to limit turfgrass watering will also, of course, lead to less water use, which will lead to less revenues. And I think now we're projecting that number is going to broach $3 million in the next year as a deficit number. And Water Commission recommended, and I'm sure Council they may have talked about it this week, they will take that from reserves right now rather than work on a rate increase and try and soften that burden that's already increased your water bills, and that's what the reserves are for. The option of last resorts, of course, that they're starting to talk about is a rationing program, and that would occur sometime in 2017. It's very, very difficult to set up. I think Josh said there's 27,000 individual water users that all have different characteristics. You might be a single person in your household. You might be 10 people in your household. And how do they determine a amount of water that is your daily use amount of water that's reasonable for your particular dynamic as your ration? So I think they're going to struggle with that. They're starting to work on it, and if we continue to have no rain, continue to have problems with a delay in desal, continue to have capacity delivery problems, just everything that's already stacked up against us, I think by the time you get to late next year, we would probably seriously be looking at some point of rationing. And then finally, both that TAP group and the Water Commission got a presentation on direct potable reuse. That is being concurrently worked on by the state, who has an end-of-year quote-unquote requirement to come back with a feasibility study that will probably just be, at that particular point, be a punt down the road to a blue ribbon group to get together and actually continue to work on the concerns with direct potable reuse, which, of course, are things we don't measure for already, like emerging contaminants like hormones or other things in the water that aren't an issue right now when they're treated as wastewater. And how do we get to use that water, say that we're putting out into the bay, how do we get to use that and use that directly without the waiting period of putting it in a reservoir, or without the waiting period of running it through groundwater for a period of time as an environmental buffer. There's a ton of work to do on that. There's a ton of data that's not available about what the issues are, how to measure it. Is anybody tracking it up till now? It would all be just a new endeavor, and so I'm not seeing that that's doing anything except still a lot of talk and a lot of research to go into it before we're ready. There's not a state in the nation that does it, but I know there's places in other countries that do that, and so I'm kind of baffled why we're having so much trouble to get to that point. That's it.
One takeaway I had from the meeting on Tuesday also for the city is set up to assist homeowners for watering trees efficiently if they would be contacting the city rather than depending on the normal way trees get the water either through rain or lawn watering. More efficient direct impact on trees with less water use information is available at the city. Okay, anyone else?
Thank you, Mr. Jordan, Commissioner Jordan, for that complete report. I wondered if, I don't recall you mentioning consideration of, I know staff is fully focused now on getting the desal plant finished, but I wondered if they were looking at, as soon as that's done, looking at expanding it further. Because its capacity, it does have a complete capacity. I think, of 10,000.
Desal expansion is like one of the things on my list that's not going to be talked about at the Water Commission before it's talked about at Council. So for whatever reason. So I don't have an answer for you. I wasn't privy to the group that went and met up the food chain, but that's a highlight on my list.
Okay, thank you. Just the ABR meeting, I don't have anything to report from Historic Landmarks, but at the should I go ahead on ABR? Where are you going?
Go right ahead. I was just going to talk about the affordable.
The November 2nd meeting, the 414 Chapala Street project, just 21 rental units of smaller sizes. Which I was glad to see, 808 square feet average, and it got project design approval with some details on chimneys to come back for consent calendar. That is in the test program in the priority overlay zone. And then 634 Anacapa Street, there was considerable discussion yesterday about it, and I think generally the commission likes the project design, but there was a lot of discussion of details. So that one is still being reviewed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lodge and I were at the South Coast Affordable Housing meeting, which is all of the municipalities in the South Coast, plus housing agencies within the cities and the nonprofits that meet every couple of months. Big crowd, about 40 people. And the presentation was on the new state legislation that's going to become effective relative to state bonus density, the 4 acts that we touched on before. And it's simple and complicated, but if you're a user, I think, or potential user to solve some issues on affordable housing, I think it would be good for people to understand what's going on. In light of that, as everyone knows, we have a resolution that we passed on to City Council. One of the items was to set up task forces to look at affordable housing in addition to employer housing and co-ops to see the feasibility of trying to encourage those programs. And I think this just gives another reason why I think we should get people together on the affordable end in particular to see the combination of legislature and ordinances that we have in the city to try to create it and how effectively we can do it. So looking forward to hopefully the City Council allocating staff time to that effort, and I guess we'll find out about that sometime, maybe in December, when the my understanding from Ms. Brooke was when the suggested suggestions for the AUD program go up for consideration, that this consideration would be made as well. That's what I understand from her. So looking forward to that. There's a lot out there, and hopefully we can get a group together who can be creative in trying to get more affordable housing on the ground. Anybody else? Okay, it's first. Yes.
Chair Campanella and commissioners, I generally am the quiet one under the dais, but I did want to acknowledge that for 93 years, the Planning Commission has been the guardian and steward of our land use and has done a remarkable job in doing so. And I wanted to acknowledge the recent passing of a planning commissioner who was a part of this legacy, and that is Dr. Dan Secord, recently passed, and he served on the commission from 1992 to 1997. So,
thank you. Yeah, great guy and varied background and really helpful to the community in a number of ways. Okay, first Thursday is this evening, so if you get out there while the weather is still good and balmy, that'd be great. Enjoy yourself, and thanks to staff and commission, and we will reconvene in 2 weeks from today. Correct, we will not be here. There is no meeting next week. Thank you. What's that?
Next week. That's what all this is for.
The 10th is, I'm sorry, pardon me. Straighten me out here. We meet next week.
We do meet next week.
Okay. And then the 17th. Did I miss one? 17th as well?
And we meet on the 17th.
Okay. And the following week. Why are we doing that? Are we?
We're ready for Thanksgiving.
Are we? That's really putting a burden on us to meet 3 weeks in a row. Okay. Sorry about that. So we'll see you next Thursday. Thank you.